Right. So our next agenda item session is experiential learning. It's an alumni panel. And today we have Karley, Cassandra, and Shanika. Welcome. And the moderator for this session is Bridgette. So Bridgette, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, Karley, Cassandra, and Shanika for joining us today. We're going to talk about differences between apprenticeships. I don't think I spelled that right. Maybe I did. And co-ops and internships. And the first thing I would like to do is have each of the alumni introduce themselves. And we're going to start with Karley.
Hello, I'm Karley Malone. I'm from Happer, Pennsylvania, and I go to Montgomery County Community College. I'm in the GSK apprenticeship, where I am in the associate biochemist apprentice. So I'm doing a lot, going through all different departments. But as I'm doing that, I'm going to school and I'm going for an associate's in biotechnology.
Thank you. And Cassandra.
Hi, I'm Cassandra Mitchell. I went to Austin Community College, and that's where I completed my internship in 2019. I'm still currently working for the college. I live in Georgetown, but work at our Round Rock campus. And I got my associates in biotechnology and then biology a few years ago.
Very good. And Shanika.
I'm from Fairfield, California. I went to Solano Community College. I got my bioprocess technician certification in 2007. And then I went on later on in 2016, I got my bachelor's degree in management with an emphasis in manufacturing. I currently work at Biomarine in Novato, California. And I'm a purification senior supervisor. And the degree that I completed, I already mentioned. So that is where I am. I'm in management. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'm going to just for a brief second talk about the differences between each of these different opportunities. And then they're going to each talk about their experience with those in that area. And so an apprenticeship, the reason we came up with this panel is that we don't see apprenticeships that often here in the biosciences. And Maggie talked about, oh yeah, they have one at GlaxoSmithKline and she has an apprentice. So she thankfully shared Karley's information with me. And so we're gonna get to hear a little bit about that. But this is a structured occupational training program. These are typically registered apprenticeships, and they combine on-the-job training and related instructions with workers to lead the practical concepts that are required for the occupation. And apprenticeships are a win-win for businesses, for public, and colleges also will benefit whenever they get tuition for doing the related instruction. And apprentices are paid while participating on the job, and then they come away with work experience as well. And so that's a win-win for them. And many times tuition is provided as well. Karley is going to give us some more information about this though. And then internships and co-ops, as I read through trying to figure out which one was which, they're often used very interchangeably. So you have to kind of read the definition for the institution that you're working with. So internships are typically shorter than co-ops, 10 to 12 weeks. And typically they're in the summer. They might be paid or unpaid. But in other disciplines, I've seen that internships may be longer and they might be like six months. So again, it depends on the program that you're working with. And then a co-op, the placements typically will run a little bit longer through the academic calendar year. Typically you'll get course credit for that. Students are required to work more hours. Again, might be paid or unpaid, but what they do both have in common is that they provide valuable work experience for the students. And for employers, this can be a trial period to see if that student is a good fit in their company. And many times students are hired by the company for which they did their internship or co-op. I invite you to, when you'll have access to these, share these with your students. There's links to each of these, but GlaxoSmithKline, easy for me to say, has both internships, co-ops, as well as apprenticeships. And what I found whenever I was digging around on their website is they have them in different parts of the country. And so I shared this link with my colleagues in Nebraska, thinking that because there is one in Lincoln as well. So that opportunity that I didn't know was around is actually there in Lincoln as well. And so there are several different places, and it depends on the time of year and the place that you're looking of what's available to students. So I would invite you to have your students check in to those opportunities. Okay, so we're going to go back to our alums. And so Karley, you're muted though.
Sorry, you were breaking up for me.
Oh, there you go. Oh, let me take my video off. Maybe I'll be better that way. Okay, it's your turn.
Oh, okay. So what I do in my job, the apprenticeship that I have is very expansive. So I go through all the different departments that deal with the production and the documentation of the drug production. So I've been through, let's see, I've been on the floor with production with the bioreactors. I've been in QA with all the documentation, and I'm currently in stability right now, where I am testing the drugs for long exposure to different temperatures, humidities, and light. So that's been really fun, but I'll be going on to quality control biochemistry, quality control microbiology. But there's no experience required for this apprenticeship, at least. From what I've heard, all the GSK apprenticeships, you don't need any experience. They actually go for recently graduated high schoolers because you need no experience. They want to give you everything that you need. So they got me when I was in my first year of college, and I still didn't have actual experience, but I had taken some biotech courses, so I vaguely knew what was going on. But yeah.
That's awesome. All right, thank you. Cassandra, what was your experience? What did you do, and what was the time requirement?
So what I did for my internship is I grew up our stem cells and ran our cell culture manual on them. When I took the class, the stem cells didn't do what they were supposed to do. So I was hired to do the internship so I could troubleshoot the stem cells and get those up and running and adapt the protocols, which I did successfully. And then I also beta tested a new cell line for the cell culture class as well. We went from a CHO DP12 line to a CHO K1 line. And that was successful. As far as ACC's requirement for the internship, you have to be enrolled in the program. You have to be close to graduating, like it be your last semester, I think is it, but sometimes we'll go to second to the last semester. You have to work 190 hours during that 10 to 16 weeks, depending on the semester you do it. And then at the end of it, there is a poster session where you make a poster and present in front of people.
Okay. Awesome, thank you. And Shanika, what was your experience like on the job training?
Yeah, so I actually did not go through an internship or apprenticeship. When I was in the biotech program, I actually applied to Genentech as a temp to hire employee. So I actually started my journey as a temp employee at Genentech, and it typically starts with about a 6-month contract where usually they could either extend your contract for longer if they want to evaluate you longer, or they can convert you into a FTE, or they could not. So they have those three different options. And when I did join Genentech as a temp, I was also still attending Solano College in the program. So I was actually doing both at the same time. So they knew that I was still pursuing my education. I hadn't graduated yet. I was close to graduation, but wasn't completed yet. And they still took me on. And I joined the cell culture department, where I learned everything as if I was a regular employee. So I learned filter integrity testing, CIP, SIP of bioreactors, media preparation, inoculations, 400 liter to 12K pre-uses, and cell culture fermentation and harvest, sample retention and cell counts using microscopes, osmometers, and bioprofile analyzers. And so I did gain a lot of experience in that short 6-month time frame. Thank you.
Very cool. Okay, I'm trying to move to the next slide and it's not going for me. Okay, here we go. Okay, so again, we'll start with Karley. So how does the experience that you had in your courses relate to what you're doing in on your job?
So everything I learned in my classes has directly correlated to what I'll be doing in my apprenticeship. So not so much with stability yet, but more with the biochemistry, microbiology, all the theory, all the techniques, all the technology. It's all in the labs that are there. A little more advanced because, you know, top of the line industry, but it's absolutely amazing. I've never had such a direct line of, I recognize this. It's been amazing.
That's awesome. Okay, and Cassandra, how did your class experience, coursework experience relate to your what you learned in your biotech courses?
So of course, my cell culture class led directly into my internship. The techniques that I used there were used there, the aseptic techniques, the biosafety cabinet, all of that. From my other courses was more like the troubleshooting when experiments didn't go wrong, different solution preps, and the things like that were also involved. So.
Okay, and I think something you and I had talked about, your experience was with in your classes, that when things actually worked, what versus what happens whenever you're preparing for the classes. So you want to expand on that?
Yeah, so when you're in a class and taking it, you know, your lab manual is done, all of these labs are beta tested, you go through, you're like, here's a lab in 1 or 2 days, or, you know, a week tops, you do a lab start to finish, and then you move on to the next one. But when you go into your internship, your project is longer and it doesn't work and you have to start over and you have to troubleshoot it. So, you know, it's a little bit different from the courses that way, in that it's not just start to finish and you know it's going to work. And if it doesn't work in the class, because sometimes not all experiments work in the class, that's frustrating too, you don't get to redo it because you're on the schedule and you have to go to the next one. So you practice the techniques that counts for the class and then you move on. But again, when you go back to this project, you don't just get to move on. You got to get it to work. So right. That's there.
Exactly. Thank you. All right. And Shanika, how did your class work relate to your work experience?
One thing about the classwork that I really appreciated is that it prepared you for the manufacturing environment being so dynamic. Manufacturing is always changing, always new products, always new systems and equipment and things like that. Definitely the cell culture experience running the small scale bioreactor in class, it really related over when I went over into cell culture, because it was exactly the same type of technology, just smaller and larger tanks than what we were using in class. Far as purification, in the biotech courses, we learned a lot about the theory and the concepts, but when you go into the manufacturing, you're blown away by the type of equipment that's there, but all of the theory and knowledge that you learn in school, you understand what's going on when you go to run that equipment, and so you know what to look out for and what to monitor. So that's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Very good. That's awesome. And for each of you, kind of what are your future plans and following your internship, co-op, et cetera? Karley?
So I plan to continue my education. So right now I'm working my associates, but I'd really like to go up to my master's in biotechnology and continue with this company through either quality assurance or get to research and development somehow. But it's not a requirement that I stay in the apprentice or stay with the company after the apprenticeship. I'm allowed to leave and go wherever I want, or there'll be a spot for me directly when I'm done the apprenticeship. So I have lots of options.
Options are always good. And Cassandra, how about you?
So my internship actually led to me continuing on with ACC. So in a similar role, it moved on to also doing some of the prep work for our cell culture and biomanufacturing classes and some of our lower level classes as well. I have actually taken on a WAVE project. So we have the WAVE 25 bioreactor from GE and been working on adapting a CHO DP12 line to suspension to get it to run into that. So we're actually doing that class like right now.
Hopefully it's going well.
It's going well. They're running the easy titer right now. So I hope to continue in some role of this. I've kind of applied for more of the NSF grant work and hopefully get to stay on with ACC for longer.
Great, thank you. And Shanika.
So I plan on using the experience that I have since I've been doing this industry since 2004. So I've learned cell culture, I've learned fermentation using yeast cells and bacterial cells. I did cell culture at Genentech and now at BioMarine, CHO cells as well. They're actually transitioning into the gene therapy space, and that looks like it's going to be the new booming industry. And so I want to get my hands into that area so that I can learn that technology as well. I am a senior supervisor, so I'm on track to become a manager. So I plan on continuing up the leadership pathway in manufacturing. Thank you.
Very good. And just a follow up on that, you went ahead and you got your bachelor's, right? And so did you get your bachelor's with at Solano?
I did not. Actually, when I was going to Solano, a bachelor's was not offered at the time. So I graduated in 2007.
Okay.
So I completed the 2-year program at Solano while I was still working. And while I was working, I was still attending and like taking some courses. And my goal was to transition over to UC Davis to their bachelor's program. But as a working individual, 40 hours a day and going to school, that was taking a long time to pursue. And so I found through University of Phoenix, I was able to take classes once a week and for 5 weeks at a time in order to achieve my bachelor's degree in management. Because at Novartis, I had already went up the ranks in the manufacturing and I knew that next step would be a supervisor. And so I needed to learn those leadership skills in order to manage the people on the floor. And so that's why I changed the direction for schooling. But if I did go back, I probably would pursue a master's in the gene therapy field or continuing in the biotech.
Okay, very good. So that's another pathway. So we've had some kind of discussions recently about implementing or including some of the management and different types of business classes within a biotech program to help students build that skill as well as the skills that are involved in doing lab work. So
Yeah, that would be awesome.
All right, I think I can't go any further. So does anybody have questions for our panelists about their plans, our future plans, and how they are transitioning? But I want to thank everybody for participating. Karley, Cassandra, Shanika, and sharing your experiences. I think that's awesome. It's always great to hear from y'all. Do we have any questions from the audience?
I just dropped a question in the chat. I'd like to ask the panel if they could reflect on what they learned in their program, and would they have liked to have anything back in their program that would have benefited them in their present position? Particularly, would they have liked to have the opportunity to practice certain things back in their program when they're in training?
Guess I could start this off. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, please do.
All right. Well, I've been in the industry a long time, so I've seen a lot of things, and I think it would be fun to have in class. Like, we have the SOPs that we kind of mimic for the procedures on site, but one thing that always trips people up and get them, you know, some deviations and things like that when they first come in manufacturing is the documentation on the batch records. So the batch records with the SOPs, if you guys like did a mimic of a batch record and how to execute with an operator verifier scenario, that would really help them out when they come to do GMP documentation on the floor. I think that's a real critical foundation to get them started with, and will help them out and the company out very much when they transition into the workforce.
Perfect.
Nice.
I think mine's a little bit more simple than that. It's usually when students are given reagents or something to test, they're given all of the information with like an aliquot of the sample. Part of my struggle was realizing that sometimes you're just given a manual or the information that comes with it when you buy it online, and you've got to figure it out. You've got to figure out how to resuspend it. You've got to figure out how to do different units. If your protocol calls for units that's different than what's given to you, you have to do the conversions. And a lot of that's just done for students. So I had to figure some of that out and figure out, like, here's a manual for a piece of equipment, make it work.
That's a very good point. Karley, did you have anything?
So I'm not done with my associates yet. I'm still in class. I still have 2 more biotechnology classes that I have to go through. But from what I've experienced, I feel like every box has been checked. It's taught me so much. I've used it in the lab at my job. I don't feel like anything's been missed. If anything, I feel like my job has supplemented it, but I don't think I've missed anything.
Great job, Maggie. Thank you. Another question. If you had a younger sibling, would you recommend your pathway? How would you convince them to go into biotech? How about we go in our same order we went before? Karley?
Convince them to go into the biotechnology industry. I don't know. My siblings, I do have 2 siblings, and they're very wild. I don't know if they'd be able to sit in a lab, quite honestly. I don't know. I don't know how to convince them. They're very not science-minded. They're very artistic. So it's a little bit of a hard question for me. Sorry.
What if it wasn't a younger sibling, but a friend?
Friend.
Would you recommend an apprenticeship pathway?
Oh, I would. Sorry, I thought it meant more like biotech apprentice. But no, if I had a friend that was interested in the biotechnology industry, I would definitely recommend an apprenticeship because of how much support that it gives you and how free range it is. Because you can go to school, you can work, and you can still do so many things within the apprenticeship. Sorry, I misunderstood the question.
Okay. Perfect. Cassandra?
I do recommend a lot of people come to the program, like a lot. We just had HVAC come and work on our hoods because they were down, and a guy was in there and he was interested about some of the equipment. So I was like, oh, you should come check it out. There's many different ways you can go. Even if you stay like in HVAC or biosafety, you can just get more behind the scenes for it. I definitely recommend the internship at the end of the program as well. So.
Perfect.
I just tell them like all the cool things you can do, because people, I think their first question is like, well, what is biotechnology? That sounds really technical, like I can't do it. I was like, no, biotechnology is literally everything. It can be from like food production, it can be from algae to cell culture, the medicines you take, the band-aids you use. Technically, that could all be biotechnology and manufacturing.
And agriculture.
Yeah, agriculture.
Yeah.
There's so many different ways. It's like, it's everything, but people just don't know it's called biotechnology.
That's exactly right. We're not doing very good on our branding. How about you, Shanika? Would you recommend the pathway that you took, or would you?
Definitely recommend the pathway I took, and I have reached out, as Jim knows, to many of his graduating students and to try to get them to get it over here and get a job as soon as they're ready to graduate. It's an awesome experience to come right out of school and get right into the business of what you're doing. And then as a temp employee, you really get a taste of it and see if you really do like it without having that full commitment of, being a full-time employee. So I think it's a good thing for them to do. I think that it really helps to get on the floor as soon as possible and apply those skills, because you can start to lose those skills if you take too long of a break in between and you kind of try to start to forget those things that you learn in school. One thing about the interviews is that sometimes we'll interview students and we'll ask them, okay, give me a rundown of chromatography. What do you remember from school? And some of them are get stuttered up, but they know it. They just can't remember it. And so I always tell people to touch up on the content that you learned in school before you interview so that you can speak to the things that you've listed on your resume.
That was a perfect segue for my next question. Thank you, because it was, how did you prepare for your interview? And you just told us how you did that. That's awesome. Thank you. Do you have anything else as far as interviewing skills that, especially what you see with students right now?
Yeah, one thing is that you don't have to have all the technical skills, right? We do learn about the technical skills and everything, but you don't have to have the hands-on experience to land a job. And another thing is, I know one of them mentioned that they were going to pursue their master's degree. You want to be very careful about that entering into the manufacturing associate level, because they feel some companies feel that a master's level is too high for a manufacturing associate entry position. Maybe once you're in and you're going for a little while and you've made some progress, then you want to get the master's and things like that. But some employers won't even hire if you went for your master's and don't have that hands-on experience. So just be mindful of that. Also, if you haven't got your degree yet, I told them to put in progress. So your bachelor's degree in progress. When I started at BioMarin, I was a senior associate at Novartis, and I hadn't obtained my bachelor's degree yet. I was actually still in school pursuing my bachelor's for management, but because I put that I was my bachelor's in progress, I was still selected on the interview. You got to remember that computers are checking these resumes, and if you don't have that in the resume, your resume won't even get selected. So that's one thing I learned when I was transitioning between companies, is to put that you have a bachelor's in progress, and then you'll get a chance to get started before you even finish.
Perfect, thank you. Karley, do you have, what were your fears if you were preparing for your positions, and how did you help prepare for those interviews?
So the interview process for GSK was very, very long. It was over a couple months. It didn't help with COVID, but I believe there was an over-the-phone interview, multiple like Zoom interviews, and then there was one 3-hour panel where all the other potential apprentices were on, and we all were put into separate rooms, and it was a very long endeavor, but it was more an interview of my character, seeing the room for growth that I had than my technical knowledge of things, because they didn't require any experience. The only nervousness I really had was public speaking. I just had to be genuine to myself. And so that's what I did in all the interviews.
Okay. And I think I remember you telling me that you met a person at the career fair, and then you went back and showed great interest in the follow-up with that. And that made an impression, a positive impression as well. So.
Yes, I can tell that story if you want.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so there were multiple career fairs at Monco. And so I noticed that on one day it was a GSK table and I'd already applied, but I wanted to see what they had to say. So I went to the table, I talked to the person behind the desk. I had a class, so I went to class, and then I had more questions. So I went back to the table. I really hit it off with the person that was there. He gave me his card, everything. And then later in one of the many interviews I had, it turned out that that person behind the table was one of the people that was going to be interviewing me. And not only was he interviewing me, he was the director of quality for my site. So someone very important was behind a little table in my cafeteria trying to recruit. So everyone you meet's important, and that's how I learned that.
Very good. Thank you. Cassandra, do you have anything that you would like to add?
So I go off of, I kind of got my job because I was just really good in class and my professors wanted me to continue the work. I didn't actually have to interview for my position, which isn't the case. A lot of people who go through a program go through interviews, whether it be internal or external through a company, because we do both. So interview skills are very important. Part of what our program does is your resume is an assignment through each class, and you have to update it and show it to your professor and your peers so you can keep that up to date and ready to go and go through those mock questions as you go through the program, which is very important. I think backing up what everybody else is saying is like your connections are important. So if I didn't present myself appropriately in class and didn't do my best work, I wouldn't have been offered this position. Even meetings like this, like everybody you meet in biotechnology, it's a tight-knit group. Everything's a connection. And so you just want to put your best self out there.
Right. I agree. So I guess that's a really good lesson for, excuse me, for our students. I try to convince mine that, remember, you're going to probably ask me for a reference. maybe whatever you act like in class might want to make me give you a good one. So that's a very good point of how we act, no matter where we are, leaves an impression. So yeah, it's a very good point.
With your peers though, because if you're in class with somebody, they're going to go out in industry and they're going to be working. And when you're ready for a job, it would be nice if they could recommend you, or maybe they're on your interview panel, or, you know, depending on the company and how high they work their way up. Everybody you come into contact, your peers, your professors, people in industry, when we do things like this, it's just important to be aware of that.
Right. And one of the other questions is how, because of the future of the scope of biotech and how it's growing, how can we mitigate the confusion in people's minds about what biotech actually is? If you guys have any ideas, that's a tough question. Question for the ages, if you ask me. Anyone? Shanika, Karley?
I'll jump in on that. I think the main thing for biotech is that no matter what the technology is, the intent is the same, right? And a lot of the technology that you learn from one will transition over or be applicable for the other. I would say that, like, I went and toured a pilot facility. I never worked in a pilot facility, but when I went in, you know, the gowning procedures are the same. A lot of the laminar flow hood, BSCs, all that is the same. You'll see some things, some equipment and things that you've never worked with, but you'll understand the concept because it's similar to something you've worked with for whatever cell line it's been. I've worked with cell culture, yeast, and bacterial cells, and a lot of them can use the same equipment. Like, we do changeovers and you change it over and you can use the same things. So don't be intimidated, I would say. Think about all the skills that you have learned and which ones do apply, and the ones that you don't know, you'll learn. Someone will train you and you'll pick it up.
Okay. And mastering what you are exposed to in class rather than, oh yeah, okay, I'll do a little bit of that. Good point. Karley, Cassandra, do you guys have anything to add? Are there any other questions for our panelists?
I think she summed it up great. But like, just, you know what you're taught and then be able to learn on the job. And adapt to situations, and knowing the basis of the theory of chromatography or gel electrophoresis, and then you can apply that to other instruments that are always changing because the theory is still the same. So gel electrophoresis, the bioanalyzer process the information the same. In our program, we learn more of the gel electrophoresis than we do the bioanalyzer because of cost and maintaining a program. But if you understand that basis, it's easier to apply it to the more advanced technology.
But can I ask Shanika, so how do you counsel or mentor somebody who's entry level on how to move up? You know, what would you say to them? How do you attract attention? How do you, like you did?
So it's really hard when you're on the manufacturing floor to be visible. A lot of people don't get to know you because you're always on the production floor, you're gowned up and you're executing the process. So what I found is that people actually get to know you through communication, through emails, and participating in different projects and continuous improvement initiatives throughout the site, putting in safety improvements throughout the facility, basically being recognized for not just only doing just your job in your day-to-day, just not applying only your technical skills, but also showing how you could help others in developing your team by training them and showing them the skills that you've learned and how you can train someone else to do the same and do it safely and compliantly and efficiently.
Yes, very, very well said. You got a lot of that.
And then how
So
do you,
writing is a skill.
so you switched companies. How do you know when a new company will allow you to move up faster than your current company? So how do you weigh that?
That one's hard. I don't transition that often. I transition most of the time because I have to. Like Genentech, they had a freeze hire because one of their products, the shelf life got cut in half. At Novartis, they sold their company to Eli Lilly, and then we had a layoff there. At Biomanufacturing, I've been here since 2015, and it's just a growing company. But there's like 4 different manufacturing facilities in one, and so you got a lot of movement around. So I've moved from facility to facility and things like that. And yes, that is a transition that you're kind of scared about too, because it's equipment and processes and people that you've never worked with. But same thing applies, just like I mentioned before, as long as you can apply those skills and things that you've learned in one department or one company and use those skills at your new company or your new department. And one other thing that's really important is not just the technical skills, but the behaviors. So those are the things that are very hard to ingrain and teach, especially at the work level already. If there's anything you could do at the schools to help with the behaviors, like those are the ones that, like, taking a minute, stopping when unsure, safety and compliance comes before efficiency, things like that. A lot of people want to rush. They want to get work done, but with sacrificing safety and compliance. So I would say, make sure people take their time, look over their documentation, and, take their time, do it right the first time. You hear that a lot in manufacturing.
Very good point.
Can I ever request? First, before I ask you anything, I would just like to thank the 3 of you, Shanika and Cassandra and Karley, for talking to us today. It's been really wonderful, and it's great to hear your experiences. My request is, we are always looking for student alumni profiles for biotechcareers.org. It's an ATE project that we have, and we have about 33 different profiles now where people are sharing their stories about where they went to college and what they've learned. And I'm just wondering if it'd be okay if I were to contact you later to follow up and see if you might be interested in doing something like that. You just nod. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. You guys gave so much insight into how things work, and your energy is contagious. So I really appreciate you participating in this panel. Thank you so much.
Yes, I would like to thank you all again for participating. I so much appreciate it. I enjoyed meeting with Karley and Cassandra. I'm sad that I didn't get to meet with Shanika. Maybe I'm gonna have to set that Zoom call up anyway. But I really appreciate it. And I'm definitely gonna be sharing your insight with my students. So is there anything else Any other questions or comments for our panelists?
So Bridgette, I would like to thank you for leading the panelists, and I would like to thank
You're
all of the panelists too, as PI for InnovATEBIO. I'm always so impressed with alumni panels. I feel like we should be asking for their advice continually from the time they start a program and then continue on through the alumni network. They have great insight.
Exactly. Exactly.